The Chamber Gallery, located in the historic Dime Bank building, was to present the first exhibition of the 2020 season, Metropolis, and was to have the opening reception on Saturday, March 21st, 2020, at the Chamber Gallery from 7 to 9 p.m. However, at the time, the gallery director and her crew had just completed the mounting of the exhibition in preparation for the opening reception. On March 16th, the pandemic lockdown for our Lackawanna County was instituted. Our opening was rightfully canceled. Through the efforts of the local organization Women to Women Thrive, the Chamber Gallery has created a documentary video on the exhibition called Metropolis and will be made for distribution to honor the artists and their exceptional work. The video will present the works in the exhibition, informative interviews and discussions with the artists about their work, and the areas they have chosen to depict. Actual filming of the sites on the location in each artist's chosen city, which includes New York City, representing the iconic example of the large metropolis, but primarily Scranton and Carbondale, Pennsylvania, are the keystones of the exhibition. Each of the two local cities were historic, thriving major hubs at the time, and growth in their own right in Lackawanna County. The documentary also highlights the contrasts to the present-day challenges Northeastern Pennsylvania cities and towns are facing, and the ways in which the people of our area are meeting those challenges. Artist painter for over 50 years, Warren Cox, board member of the Scranton Architectural Heritage Association and generational citizen of Scranton, possesses scholarly knowledge of the history and development of the city, which he has beautifully documented in over 80 paintings of surviving architectural and residential area hallmarks, representing the historical beginnings, origin, and foundation of the city through the evolution of time. Many of his works will be presented in the exhibition. I'm Ruthanne Jones, and I'm the director of the Chamber Gallery, and we are located in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and this is the exhibition Metropolis, and it's all about the city, and we have 5 very talented artists that have taken various elements that compose and really define the city life and the city environment. And I'm with a wonderful painter, wonderful artist, and a very dear friend of mine, Warren Cox. Hello, Warren.
Hello, Ruthanne.
Warren, tell me, now you are primarily in this exhibition representing your architectural work. And I know that you are very much concerned about the preservation of the grand architecture. of Scranton, where you have been a generational connection to Scranton through your life and through your ancestors. Please talk to us about the importance of the architecture of Scranton.
Scranton is a gold mine of beautiful, the grand era of architecture, right up into including Art Deco and Art Nouveau. And then the ball dropped in the town went, the coal industry failed, and everything went away, the railroad industry and everything, but all the money was made in the old Scranton, in the steel industry, especially making the railroad T-rails were made at the Scranton family, Scranton Iron Works, and the Lackawanna Railroad and the coal industry paid the bills. And then you had the doctors and the lawyers and the Indian chiefs that captains of industry. The Connell family was big in. They had the Scranton Button Factory, which was the largest button factory in the world, was in South Scranton. And then those buildings later became Capitol Records. And there was a lot of money in Scranton for the time, and they loved spending it on grand homes. And the hill section was the place to be and the place to build. And there were Greek revivals, Victorians, Dutch colonials, all these wonderful homes that many have gone by the wayside now because of the University of Scranton tearing them down and making room for their campus and so forth, urban decay.
So many of the paintings that you've included in this collection are no longer in existence.
Right, like that one right there, for example.
Tell us a little story about that particular.
That house was built on the 400 block of Madison Avenue in the hill section, and it was built by Max Rice, who was a grocer. He had on the wholesale block. He had one of those big wholesale grocer supply places, and he showed his standing in the community by building that one. And that's by far not one of the grander ones in the old hill.
But it's very charming.
Yeah, but there were many greater. The Connells built 6 mansions in the hill. Two of the Connells were mayor of Scranton. There were doctors and bankers and lawyers in the Connell family. The Scranton family, their home is still there on the University of Scranton campus.
Excuse me, but the Connell building is a major, still stands in
the Connell building is down in North Washington.
Right in the city, yes.
Yeah, that's residential now. They made that over just recently into residential apartments and lofts.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, at least the buildings are being preserved. And
those are
repurposed.
Yeah.
But many have been destroyed,
Right.
sadly. But there's still many that are left. And I noticed you have also the fire station.
Yes.
Which is also there's a little bit of the courthouse.
No, the City Hall.
City Hall.
Yeah, it's attached with a very European bridge, arched bridge between the two buildings and over the alleyway.
And I noticed you put a lot of detail into your paintings.
Well, especially because a lot of them are gone, so I want to make sure that you see them as they were, and some of them are could go anytime. So this is what it looked like.
Exactly, which is important for us to know and to remember that there was a lot of architecture.
Yeah, a lot of
value,
good architecture.
Fine architecture.
Yeah.
And I love the Lackawanna street that you have. I can just imagine myself walking down Lackawanna Avenue at that time.
That was called the Great White Way on postcards. Scranton was the first city to be electrified, to have streetlights that were electric. It was the first city to have electric trolleys.
Yes.
And when the gas lamps went and they put electric lights on Lackawanna Avenue, which was very bustling back then.
Yes.
That was like, they called it the Great White Way, I mean, before Broadway, you know, so.
That's right.
Yeah.
And of course, the Electric City sign commemorates
Right.
the
And
Electric
it
City.
should, it was the first, it should be, you know, it should be remembered.
That's true. And it's interesting, I know Kathy Fallon has captured the Electric City, and I understand it had originally incandescent bulbs is what
Yeah,
was
oh,
the
sure,
lighting.
yeah.
And now they have changed it to the LED
Yeah.
lighting, which is a shame.
But it's that black and
For a long time.
disused for years.
And when was it restored and revitalized?
Well, Joe Burke, our friend.
Yes, Joe
who's
Burke.
no longer with us, he was involved with and he died just before they, whenever that was, I remember it now, it was like, you know, I don't know, the 90s, I don't know.
Yes. It's wonderful that they brought that back again.
Oh, it is, it really, it's a showcase.
It is a hallmark.
Yeah.
Well, also, Warren, one of my favorite buildings is in Nayon Park, the Everhart Museum. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? You've portrayed it so beautifully in that impressionistic with the view of the reflection of the pond with the swan and the cherry trees.
Yeah, that's kind of an altruistic, it kind of goes back to what it was back when I was a kid. There was a very large swan pond where the reflecting pool is now, and there was a long reflecting pool right in front of the museum proper, right in front of Mr. Everhart's statue. There were swans and geese and ducks and whatever happened to hippity hop its way over there and lived, water lilies, and there's a little island in the middle of a little house for the little critters to live in.
Oh, wonderful.
It was very nice for the kids.
It's a beautiful setting.
Yeah, yeah.
With the cherry trees.
Cherry trees all around, yeah.
Yes.
And then the museum, Bill, what's his face, Spears,
Bill Spear.
used to do a planetarium thing for all the kids.
I believe it was called the Spitz Planetarium.
Well,
And it was
there you go.
actually an artifact in itself, as I do recall, that it projected the stars on the building. That in itself was a valuable object of history.
It was, you know, it worked for me. And then they had all those minerals, like fluorescents and different lights and all that. That whole wing that's all the stuffed birds that Dr. Everhart himself had taxidermy.
That was his collection.
And they had the beehive, the glass beehive in the basement. You could see the bees carrying on their business,
Yes.
like voyeurs, you know.
Yes.
And the little Victorian dollhouse they had down there every Christmas.
Oh, yes, that was a tradition.
Yeah, and it was quite the doll. I mean, you know, all the family lived in it, and
That was wonderful.
they had little teacups and everything. Everything was.
And they have a very fine pre-Columbian collection.
Yes, they do. You know, they used to have the mummy from South
Yes.
America.
I believe the mummy was returned for burial.
Well, I know it was. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because it was
Yes.
in a glass case there all by itself.
And also, I love the Roth collection. I think we really had a great collection of the Roth's work. And he was from Scranton, I do believe. Became quite famous.
Yeah, he painted the gold breakers and stuff like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And the building itself is actually a masterpiece of art and architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Art Deco or Nouveau kind of blend. All the bas reliefs on the outside of the classic figures with representing the arts and the sciences and whatever. It's very attractive. Yeah.
And then contrasting to that, we also have the railroad freight depot at the very top.
Right. Now, I should know, but I don't know if it's the Delaware and Hudson, the Delaware, New Jersey, something, but it's a freight terminal, and the passenger terminal was across Lackawanna Avenue from it, but it burned down in 1910, I believe. But this is a fixture of the Scranton skyline.
It is. The railroads are are the parameter of Scranton.
The railroad was the lifeblood of Scranton.
Yeah, and it's just seems sort of encircles the
And
city.
Scranton was the lifeblood of the railroad because that's where they made the actual T-rails that finally everybody's running railroads on wooden ties and all these other things, and then they splinter and fall apart. They go, oh, that won't do, you know. And they finally came up with the T-rail, and that's where, you know, we were the hub of that for,
That's right.
at the time.
And the beautiful, beautiful train station.
Yes, downtown. Yeah.
And that was restored, I believe, in the late 1980s.
Yeah, Nancy saved that from the
She
wrecking ball.
saved that.
Yeah,
Yes,
got to
Nancy
put on
Visignani really was a wonderful mover and shaker in the preservation.
Save architectural heritage, right?
And that is a masterful building. I mean, I can imagine.
That was ready for the wrecking ball.
And the tiles, when you go inside,
Oh, I
it's
love
now
that.
the Radisson
Love
now, the restaurant, and I love going there. But the tiles are all of the stops that were made along the way.
And they're actually, they really are, like you go in and there's so much to look at with that skylight and everything else. But then the light fixtures and the woodworking and the marble all over. But those tile pictures they're like Klee, who is well known German artist, I believe.
Yes.
But he's not as well known to the general public for his landscapes, but his landscapes are stunning, and that's what these are like in tile, and they're really beautiful.
They're exquisite. And also St. Mary's Convent.
In South Scranton, yeah.
And you did tremendous, wonderful detail on it.
Yeah, that I spent a lot of time on details because of the curves of the building and stuff, the shadowing and.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lovely medieval spot. You walk around a corner and there it is.
And you're out of time.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it.
You step back into medieval Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also, of course, the Albright Library.
Speaking of medieval Europe, yeah, that was, I believe I said
The
this
history
before,
of
that is modeled on a typical Parisian townhouse of 1510. The Cluny, the monks, bishops of Cluny, that was their Paris home. Not like George Clooney, but you could afford it. But.
Yes, so it was a replica, actually.
Yeah, it was modeled after it. It's very, the window lines and dormers are very much like it, but it's kind of, they took some liberties with it. But it's just, I think it's a gem of Scranton architecture.
Well, you certainly have captured the beauty of Scranton and also Paris. And we had the tragic fire at Notre Dame recently.
Yeah.
And I really adore the beautiful rendition that you have done of Notre Dame. And you have also the Opera House,
the Paris Opera House,
and you have been to Paris several times.
Yeah, I have.
Would you like to share some of your experiences there?
Scranton in the Victorian era was very much modeled after Paris, I believe, whether it was consciously or it was just the architectural taste. But most of the architecture that's gone downtown now were mansard roofs and dormers and stuff that you would think you were in Paris, because Paris didn't knock them down.
Exactly.
And I was lucky enough to have climbed up with the gargoyles on top of Notre Dame, but long before it burned, back in the 80s. But you won't be able to do that for a while, or ever.
That must have been a thrilling experience. And did you go to the Montmartre?
Oh, of course, I went to Montmartre. I almost died. That was like Montmartre is on this hill that makes San Francisco winds, and there's a funicular railroad thing that goes up to in front of Sacré-Cœur Cathedral, but Basilica. But there's also stairs that go up like the sidewalk in front of the homes that are built on the hill. So I thought, well, I'm not waiting for them to make a line was a mile long, so I go, I'll just go up the steps. Well, I got halfway up, and I'm like, on the side, I thought, I saw God. And it wasn't a soccer curve.
And the Paris Opera House.
The Paris Opera House is, is a landmark. Before the Eiffel Tower, I imagine everyone identified Paris with that and to see a piece of architecture. And that's the Place de la Concorde where they took off everyone's heads, which is a place to go. It just gives you that feeling of what went on there.
Yes. Well, I also think it's very interesting that I understand I have a friend whose son and his wife live in Paris, and I understand they have very strict rules on any kind of changes that you might make to your home.
Oh, I'm sure.
And very strict rules
Same thing in
on
London,
preserving the history. And I honestly wish that we in the United States would pay more attention.
We do have a lot of rules like that we don't enforce.
They should be.
There's a particular sign, I want to mention the profession. There's a sign downtown in Scranton that was put on the facade of a building that is totally illegal. It's huge, it's hideous.
Oh dear.
But everybody goes, well, they can't do that, but they did, and no one's going to say, and no one's telling them they can't. So.
Well, that's the unfortunate thing.
It's
but
very
we have you, Warren, who has preserved all of these wonderful buildings and this wonderful architecture, and which represents a style of a graciousness of life that we don't have anymore. There was a kind of a way of living that, and the graciousness of life, and the celebration of life that is very different from what we experience in this day.
We can wax nostalgic if we like,
Yes.
and there were, I do that over buildings that aren't there anymore or whatever,
Yes.
panoramas or whatever. But if we were to find ourselves back there, I don't really think we'd like it all that much, because we'd be giving up a lot of what we assume as our right to,
Yes, that's a
to
very
meet a
good
mouth
point.
off if I want to. You, as a woman, would not be anywhere near.
I would have been one of the suffragettes.
Well, we're going back even before that, though.
But that's true. You have a very good
But I
point.
mean, and the class distinction.
Of course.
We
Of course.
we could go back if we were rich people, because they were the ones enjoying the big homes and the carriage ride.
Well, that's very good to be reminded.
Not the scullery maid or the
Yes.
gardener,
Yes,
whatever.
the class
The
distinctions.
coal miner.
The class distinctions, the very horrible lives of the coal miners and the dangers and the
And
health.
children working in
And
mines.
children working in mines.
And factories.
So we do have to be very happy that we are living in our time. We have our own.
We have our own
difficulties,
issues.
yes. But I think it's wonderful that you preserved this architecture.
Yeah, that was then,
That was then and this is now.
And this is now,
But going back to your beginnings, how did you become interested in art? What was your first
my
art
grandmother had a big art book that had color plates of famous paintings from all over the world. I remember one of them was The Laughing Cavalier by Franz Hals. This guy with a beard, a redheaded guy with a big plume in his hat, he's laughing, And I went to some obscure, to most people, I looked in the tour book when I was in London and saw this collection, and went to the wealthy people that it had been their home, and they made it and there's the Laughing Cavalier in person, But that got me very interested in art, that one book of my grandmother's that was laying around in her living room all the time.
And there was a De Chirico, I think.
Yes, De Chirico. My favorite painting in the whole book was Melancholy and Mystery of the Street by De Chirico, and who was a surrealist, and that just fascinated me. And I just still see, all his work is very interesting. Some of it's a little really weird, but that's just the mood of that painting. How you can just paint something and it speaks to you. It was just like, yeah,
Yes.
this is menacing,
Yes.
but why? You know, that kind of thing.
Yes, obscura.
It's just a little girl running down the street
Yes.
with a hoop and a stick, you know.
And it's very, it has that surrealism to it.
Yeah.
Very much so. And the light and dark, the light and
Light and
dark.
shadow, yeah.
Light and
Very
shadow.
bright light, very obscure, menacing shadow. You know, and something over here that you can't see is casting this shadow. What is it? You know?
Yes, the mystery.
Yeah.
The mystery. And I do think it's interesting because I think you did a recent series totally different from this, and that's what I love. I love when artists go beyond what their
Comfort
primary,
zone.
their comfort zone. And you explored some in our last exhibit. You did some extremely wonderful dreamscapes, you called them.
Right. And then I saw somewhere just recently after that Georgia O'Keeffe called her not her floral pictures, but her landscapes, she called them dreamscapes. I did not know that.
I did not know that
I
either.
didn't put a saddle on Georgia's horse the right
Yes,
way.
yes.
I thought of that myself.
And speaking of Georgia O'Keeffe, Scranton had their own Georgia O'Keeffe in the extraordinary artist Hope Warren.
Hope Warren.
And you had the pleasure of being one of her students. Would you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Hope Warren was the well-known artist, especially female artist of Scranton. She painted in the difficult medium of egg tempera, for one thing.
That is.
Which is like.
And explained for.
Well, I don't know. You mix
Egg
with
whites.
with the oil paint.
Yes.
But I don't even use oil. I use acrylic because oil
Yes.
is so smelly and hard to clean, and then it takes forever to dry. It can crack. But I did dress now. We were talking about Hope.
Yes.
Hope grew up across the street from my mom, where I live now. She lived right across the street, and little girls, they were very tight, good friends. And when I was in high school, I was kind of bored in the winter outside of school. My mom said, do you want to take art classes at the museum, which was right nearby? And long story short, I ended up taking classes in sculpting from Hope Warren for several years.
And then time went on. You're very well known in the theater. You're an extraordinary, wonderful singer. And
I
and
was a
performer.
singer who got involved in theater because when you're in musicals, you have to act too.
Yeah. And then after only 20 years ago, you began to paint.
I had always wanted to paint, but I never did, and I figured, what the hell? Why not try? So I sat down and tried. That one of the girl in the woods was my very first
And that's
thing.
one of my favorite.
It was one of mine too.
I adore it. Well, see, it's never too late, is it, Warren?
No, you never know what you can do, or hopefully what you can do until you try.
And you're also a writer. I think you've written a novel.
Oh God, yeah, I wrote a novel on dealing with historical buildings and areas. It's set in, the town is called Thackeray, but it's really Scranton. And it's a murder mystery, kind of Agatha Christie-ish. Who
Wonderful.
was my favorite author when I was this high. Everybody else was reading Dr. Seuss and I was reading Agatha Christie. But
Yes. It sounds like it would make a wonderful film.
I've never taken it out of the box since I wrote it.
It'd make a great film.
Big film. Good.
Warren, you are a true Renaissance man and a dear friend, and I want to thank you so much for the great contributions you have made to our chamber gallery, and it's just a delight. Thank you so very much, my dear friend.
I'm at the Everhart Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It was built in 1908 by Dr. Isaiah Fox Everhart, who was a physician and also a renowned taxidermist who stuffed a lot of birds and wildlife and had no place to put them, so he built this to share with the people of Scranton. And in 1908, the building was started, and then in about 1912, they added the additional wings, and there's a great selection of stuffed birds and Pennsylvania wildlife art. They have a renowned collection of American primitive art and minerals and science, and they've done plays in the auditorium here. Ruthanne Jones and I did at least one play here together for Scranton Public Theater. Agatha Christie's A Murder is announced, and Ruthanne and I were friends with Hope Horn, who's a renowned Scranton artist whose paintings are in the gallery here, and a sculpture of hers right on the corner of the building. Ruthanne managed the gift shop here, and I took sculpting classes here from Hope Horn when I was a young teenager until I went away to college. A little note of interest about Dr. Everhart was that he had this ne'er-do-well son, kind of a snidely whiplash type party animal who plotted with his friends to get his father's money by murdering the old man, but one of the parties involved squealed and he went away to prison. And interestingly enough, he's buried in the family plot in Dunmore Cemetery anyway, so I guess they forgave him his misdoings. I'm in the hill section of Scranton, right where the highest point of the hill is. There used to be a home directly behind the camera here called Hilltop that could be seen from miles around. In back of me is the home of John A. Duckworth, who's a well-known architect. He designed the Houses of Parliament in Ottawa, Canada. He designed the Cleland Simpson, then the Globe Store building, the Hotel German, the Rectory at Nativity Church. Very well-known local architect. I called this Golders Green, this setting here, in a novel I wrote several years ago that I never took out of the box. But you can see the lovely homes here. I think this is a Dutch colonial. Excuse me if I'm not architecturally correct. And that's the story. We were in front of the Duckworth house before, and I just wanted you to see what was behind the camera while I was talking about the Duckworth house. This is the Frederick Platt home right across the street on North Webster Avenue in Scranton's Hill section, and it's a wonderful house from the late 1800s. Standing in front of the Albright Memorial Library. It is also called the Scranton Public Library. This was originally the site of the Albright homestead, and after Mr. Albright died, his children bequeathed this money for this magnificent building. It's made of Medina limestone and in the Chateauesque style, modeled after the Musée Cluny in Paris, which was built around 1510, and that was an example of a typical townhouse in Paris in medieval times. I'm in front of the Scranton Cultural Center, formerly the Scranton Masonic Temple. It was designed by the architect Raymond Hood, who was a famous architect for many buildings in New York and Chicago. Most familiarly, Radio City Music Hall. Coincidentally, Ruthanne Jones's mother was a rockette at Radio City Music Hall in the 1940s. This building was built in the late 20s and opened in 1930. It has two main theaters, a main auditorium that seats 1,500 people, and Shopland Hall, which is a 500-seat, more intimate theater.
Professional fine art photographer Kathy Fallon, a lifelong citizen of Scranton, derives her inspiration and takes pride in her photographs of Scranton. These include Scranton's colorful Italian festival, as well as local landmarks, including the Electric City sign, Lackawanna Station, and the Pen Paper Building. Kathy also views the metropolis of Manhattan's New York City as a tremendous source of creative, compelling, and striking imagery. Consequently, she has assembled a collection of pieces, both literal and enhanced, taken in the most photogenic of cities. The locations range from the Brooklyn Bridge to Grand Central Station to Central Park, Times Square, and beyond. All are iconic emblems of the city experience. Welcome to the Chamber Gallery in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. I'm Ruthanne Jones, and I am the director of the Chamber Gallery. On March 21st, 2020, we had created a beautiful show called Metropolis. It's all about the city. Unfortunately, our opening reception had to be canceled due to the pandemic and the COVID-19 virus lockdown. So we decided that we would create a documentary and interview all of the wonderful artists that have participated in this show. And we hope you will enjoy it. Today, our guest is Kathy Fallon, who is a very noted fine art photographer in Northeastern Pennsylvania and in Cape May and Connecticut as well. Kathy, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Ruthanne.
And I want to thank you so much for being a very major part of this exhibition.
Well, it was a very exciting exhibition. I was thrilled to do it, thrilled to be a part of it.
And I'm captivated myself by the title, Metropolis, which is the city. And I notice you have a great interest in New York City. What captivates you about the metropolis of New York City?
Well, that's a lot, a great deal. When I go to New York City, I tend to shoot my photography sort of on an emotional basis. I'm driven, and some things really get to me and some things not. Every time I go into New York, I could spend the whole day photographing everything in sight. I'm captivated by the energy, the visuals, the people, everything about New York City. I see pictures everywhere I look. And so even sometimes if we just are driving, and I take quite a few shots just from the car, you know, and because it's hard to stop and park and walk around. But everything about it is exciting to me and visually stimulating. And so I'm taken by the buildings, the people, the movement, the energy. It's all very, very appealing to me, and I don't need any extra motivation in New York. Everything I see, I want to photograph.
That's wonderful. And I notice that you have captured the beautiful buildings. Your compositions are extraordinary. The Chrysler Building, marvelous. Also tell me about these layered pieces that you do. They say they just jump out at you and they capture that energy. Tell me a little bit about how you discovered that process.
Well, I just had the idea to make photographs that no one else could make to make pieces of art. Photography is very common right now. Everybody has their cell phone. Everybody has good cameras. And every photographer wants to distinguish themselves in some way. And I've gone through many phases. I'm very eclectic in my approach. I love a lot of different aspects of subject matter. But I was in a phase of doing things that I felt only I could make. And by doing that, I used my own photographs, at least in part, in every picture I've done. I would get some layers from Photoshop stock layers or add in things, but every piece that I make has, the basis is in my photographs, and I add to it. And it was experimental. I'd add layers upon layers with different textures and different modes and so on, and just kept, without really an end. In some of these, I didn't have an end goal in mind. I just kept putting layers, see if I liked them, and try something else if I didn't, or add on top of that. But I had read somewhere once, I think it was an artist from Scranton. It wasn't in photography, but they said you should, when you write something or when you produce something, do something that no one else can do.
Exactly.
And I felt, well, if I use my own photograph, at least in part of each piece, no one else can reproduce that.
Kathy, I would love to know if you would tell me the story of Skyline and the circumstances and where you were when you took that photo.
Okay, well, that was a number of years ago, and we were actually walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. And Bill dropped us off on the Brooklyn side. My mother and I walked over towards Manhattan. And, you know, I'm not sure where, maybe about halfway over, I had my camera, of course. And there was this skyline, and it was beautiful through the lines of the cables of the bridge and so on. And I have that particular one printed on metal, which I think, with a sort of a sheen to it, and I think it added a little metallic look, which it looks good just as a regular photograph as well, but I like that metallic look to it. But that's where we were walking towards Manhattan on the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a marvelous experience to do. It's wonderful.
And also there's an atmosphere that is captured in that piece. And I love how Manhattan always seems like it's a city floating on water.
You're right.
And you've captured it beautifully.
You can actually see, excuse me, you can't see it close, but you can see the Statue of Liberty off to the left, way in the distance, but she's there.
I do see it.
Yeah.
The Statue of Liberty. And this is a very striking piece, too.
Well, this is, I had an appointment in Manhattan, and we were crossing, it's 53rd Street, I believe, and 3rd Avenue. We were crossing the street to go to lunch, and we're coming, I think I was actually after lunch, coming back, crossing the street. In the middle of the street, it was a red light. And I look up and this fog, the buildings just sort of evaporated, the tops evaporated into the fog. And I quick grabbed out my phone, I didn't have my camera that day, and just pointed it up before the light changed and then scooted back, scooted the rest of the way. But that was a spur of the moment shot, but with that fog, I just thought that was awesome.
Oh, it's iconic. And also, I must compliment you on the composition. It's so dramatic.
That's one thing. New York, it's almost like you can point the camera anywhere and get a dramatic shot. In all honesty, I mean, I took that picture literally in however long it took me to get it out, 10 seconds maybe. So I didn't have any time to think too much about the composition on that.
That was really capturing the moment.
It was indeed.
And the Chrysler Building, which is one of my favorite buildings.
It's a beautiful building.
Please talk about that.
Well, it's hard to get a really, there's obstruction, you know, it's hard to, from the ground to get a picture, but I did get that. But the photograph itself was sort of ordinary, I have to say. So I decided to just fool around with it and try to get something really eye-catching, because sometimes the photograph, you take a photograph and it's good, maybe good composition or something, but it's lackluster sometimes. So I just was experimenting, and I came up with this orange background, and I love that result.
It's very striking. It
Yeah.
really pinpoints and highlights the image so beautifully. with
I
the
actually
background.
had it recently in a local business. They got it in a 4x6 foot print, and it's really
that's
amazing.
just
It is.
Yes. And I also was fascinated by this "do not block." Where were you when you what street were you on?
Oh, I don't, well, see, there's 3 or 4, maybe more different pictures compiled in that. I don't remember what street that was, where the sign was, but it was just blocking a driveway, and it was just so graphic. I love bold, graphic things, and I just took the picture of the sign at the time, not really knowing what I was going to do with it. And it ended up being part of this collage sort of piece.
It's very interesting because you capture so many, New York, there's so many varied sections and pieces and places in New York, and you've captured so many of them so beautifully. Now, let's talk about Scranton. Now, you're a longtime citizen.
Well, lifelong. I was born and raised
Lifelong.
my whole time.
And please tell me what you love so much about Scranton. What appeals to you about your hometown?
Well, there's many visually beautiful things to take pictures of. It has the Electric City. There's a certain ring to that. You know, growing up, when I was growing up, this Scranton was quite a big deal, and it was a much bigger population than it is now, and very exciting. Although I was too young to sort of enjoy all of that, but the certain things in the city attracted me more. I need a little bit of motivation. Maybe because I live here. It's a little unlike New York, where I just can't stop shooting pictures everywhere I look. Scranton, I need a sort of a need to do it, or a motivation to do it. And I'm drawn the Lackawanna Station, which I think is
Yes.
marvelous.
It's
And the courthouse and the Electric City sign, those are I think very prominent things.
Tell me about you have used your image as the marquee, the keystone element for our sign. It seems to capture the concept of the Metropolis so beautifully. Would you tell us the circumstances in which you took that marvelous photograph?
Thank you. Yes, it's a number of years ago, and I think I just had the idea that a nighttime shot. I think it really started with wanting to capture the Electric City sign, and then I thought, well, if I get in a certain position, I can get the whole courthouse square all lit up at night, plus the sign sort of in the background. So we planned it out and went up to the top floor of the parking garage on Adams Avenue. And I took my tripod and my different lenses, and it was it was like at the corner, and it sort of got a 45-degree shot of everything. And one thing I like about this, the one with the courthouse, is that I let it sort of a long exposure so I could get, it was at nighttime, obviously, I needed a long exposure. So we got the red lights of the cars streaming along Adams Avenue, which I think sort of adds to it.
Oh, definitely.
And it, you know, it got the sign also in the distance, and gives the long exposure gave all the lights around the courthouse a little sparkle. So it was, I was very pleased with that. But then from the same vantage point, with a much longer lens, I was able to zoom in on the Electric City sign itself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right here.
Right here. Yes.
And I got, you know, what I felt was a really good shot, and I was able to bring out some of the details in post-editing, you know, out of the shadows and all. But I'm so happy now, this was a number of years ago, I forget exactly when. I'm so happy now that I did this, because now they've put the LED lights on the sign, which I don't like at all. I don't like LED lights. I mean, I know that they're better for everything, but they're not better looking. And this still had the incandescent lights, and what I remember growing up, you know, too. And so I'm so happy that I have this picture instead of now. It would not be as good a picture now.
It is so wonderful.
It's
that
a
you
warm-
were able to be in the right moment to capture the incandescent lights, which
Yeah.
were the original.
Yeah.
And I must tell you, I love the rooftops.
Oh, I know, that's
The rooftops,
beautiful. All the detail on them is amazing, actually.
it really speaks of the nostalgia, of the history
Yes.
of Scranton.
Absolutely.
It really
Yeah.
does. I'm so happy you were there at that.
I was too.
Kathy, I'm very interested in the manner in which the way these photographs occur with you. Please tell me about the Penn Security Bank photograph.
Okay, that was taken this past winter. It was a cold night. We were coming from rehearsal at the University of Scranton, and I said, I have my phone with me. I said, I want to take a few pictures at Courthouse Square at night, which I did. I got out of the car and went around, took the few pictures I wanted to. And as I crossed the street to get back into the car, Bill was waiting there for me. And I actually had the door open, ready to hop in the car, and I just happened to look up at the Penn Security Building, which is a fabulous older building, beautifully lit, everything. And I was in the perfect spot, right where I was, to take a shot of it. And I'm literally standing with behind the door, you know, the door's open, I'm ready to hop in. I thought, oh, let me just get this, got my phone back out, and I took this picture. And I hopped in the car, I took one shot, hopped in the car, and I looked at the picture, and the traffic lights were red at the time, it was a red light, and I don't know how it happened, but all these lines were coming from the lights so dramatically.
Extraordinary.
It was, and we were on our way, and I wasn't going to take it again, and then when I got home and did a little, you know, was doing some post-editing on all my pictures, I turned this into black and white, which I think was even more dramatic than the color version.
Yes.
But, I mean, sometimes it's just, photography is luck and just taking it at that instant. You know, just taking a chance, or just seeing something by chance and going ahead and taking it, and it's a one-off thing sometimes. And contrasting to the picture at the courthouse that you asked me about, and the sign, which was a long time in the planning and the execution. We were up on the roof there, you know, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes taking these pictures.
Yes.
And they're fine, they're wonderful, but I got just as dramatic of a result in 10 seconds.
In a short
And there it
period
was,
of
I
time.
took it.
And
It's seizing the opportunity sometimes.
that is it.
That's the same thing with the picture in Manhattan, the fog picture. There, I saw it, it's just like an instantaneous thing.
You were just at the right place at the right time at the right moment.
And I think photography is partly that. I think I have a good eye. I have a good eye for composition and good eye for recognizing a moment when I see it. And sometimes you can't always, even if you see something, you can't always take advantage of it. If you're driving along, I've seen many shots along the highway or something, they're gone. You can't, I see them, but you can't stop. You can't, you take what you can get. You seize the moment when you can.
Well, I'm so happy that you've captured all of these wonderful moments for us, because they're very important to our lives. They enrich our lives.
Thank you.
How did you start with photography? What was the circumstances? What drew you to the art of photography?
Well, my profession is a musician. I was a music teacher in the Scranton School District for 34 years.
Yes.
But during that time, I would always take pictures, and I just sometimes just snapshots, and sometimes my first love is the beach and everything about the ocean and the beach and the sea. And we would go to, we've gone to Wildwood Crest every year since I'm 3 years old, to the same home, in the same apartment. And so that was my first love, and I took many, many pictures there, for fun mostly, but then I took some other things, and for a while while I was teaching, I did some, I would call it now, like sort of semi-professional work. I got some jobs, I did some, I had pictures at the Sojourner restaurants at one point. I had in some offices at the PNC Bank where my father worked. So I did some work, but it became too difficult time-wise to devote more to that. I mean, I was teaching full-time. I was doing a lot of things at Marywood College at that point, and I just couldn't pursue the photography anymore, and I sort of drifted away from it. But then when I retired from teaching, it was just the beginning of digital photography, actually. And I was a little reluctant about that. I had always used film. I thought, well, how is this going to be? But I got a camera, a Canon Rebel, which is I still have it. And actually, some pictures are still in my portfolio that I took with that first camera. It's an excellent camera. I always got good lenses.
Yes.
That way I got the best lenses. And that, even if you don't have the best camera, if you have the best lenses, that helps.
What lenses do you use?
Well, I use Canon. I have all my Canon lenses are the L series. The top of there's a red line around them.
Yes.
The top of the line, and that makes such a difference. And so then, being retired, I could spend more time. And little by little, it was incremental. But I got work in a gallery down in Cape May. Then there was the Laura Craig Gallery in town. Worked with for a while, and just things. Little by little, I was able to devote more time. Actually, being retired from teaching.
You had a wonderful exhibition at Laura Craig, and the Cape May Sea series. You put a book together.
Yes, and that was sort of the thrust of that show. I did a fine art coffee table book called A Coastal Journey.
Coastal Journey.
And it was all my favorite photographs of the sea and everything. It sort of took the beach idea from when there was no man's influence wasn't there, and then little by little, man added all the way up to where the boardwalk is now. So it's sort of a journey through time, looking through the sea. Yeah, so I was very happy with that. And so then it's just that now that I've been able to devote more time, that I'm not working full time, I've just gotten more and more involved in it.
And I think it's wonderful that you experiment. You take risks, and you go beyond what the average person would think of photography. Mm-hmm. You've taken it to a beautiful level, and you've really given so much pleasure to all of us.
Well, I'm thrilled to be a part, and you've done such wonderful work here in the Chamber Gallery, and I feel that I can put experimental things here as well as traditional. I love that aspect, that you're open to it and that the people are open to it. I think it's a wonderful thing.
We're always excited to see your new work. It's always thrilling.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And you have a wonderful friend, Bill Weber.
Yes. Well, Bill has taken me anywhere in this country. Even while I was still teaching, you know, in the summer we'd go cross country. And no matter where we were, he would take me to whatever picture I wanted to take. And then now, even more so, being retired, any little picture, any amount of setup, any amount of driving, if I feel that I could get a good picture there, he will drive anywhere, stop anywhere. And it's really true that without Bill, there would be no pictures. Because he has gotten me to every single picture I've taken.
Kathy, I want to thank you from my heart for being so enthusiastic about the Chamber Gallery, and especially for the way you have extended photography beyond the usual, beyond the norm. You're a great, great pioneer in experimental work, and you are a treasure to the art of photography, and I want to thank you so much for being a part of the Chamber Gallery.
Well, thank you, Ruthanne. It's my pleasure. It's a wonderful gallery. You do a wonderful job, and I appreciate being appreciated.
Well, you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kenny Ganz is a professional photographer, a volunteer coordinator at Steamtown National Historic Site, and currently works at the National Park Service. Kenny Ganz was a former photography instructor at Miami-Dade College and photographer at Miami International Airport. A selection from Kenny's American Neon collection, showcasing over 35 years of neon signs across the country, will be featured in the show. Each photograph will be electrically illuminated from behind the photograph and will be a spectacular addition to the show. Many of the signs in this exhibit are no longer in existence. However, Kenny feels fortunate to have realized and documented this true slice of Americana.
Good afternoon. I'm Ruthanne Jones, and I'm the director of the Chamber Gallery. And we're here in the Chamber Gallery located in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. And we're here to make this documentary on Metropolis, which was an exhibition that was going to open on March the 21st. However, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown, we were unable to have our opening show. So we thought that we would have a documentary and feature all of the wonderful artists that were gracious enough to put in their beautiful works in this show. Now, Metropolis deals with the city. New York City, which is the iconic city of our country, and also we have Scranton, Pennsylvania represented, and we also have Carbondale represented. Kenny Ganz is a very professional photographer with a very, very fascinating history. His works have appeared in the Smithsonian Magazine, in Newsweek, Forbes, and the New York Times, and Trains magazines. And I want to start with the beginning. Let's start with the beginning. You're a Scranton native originally,
Yes, I am. I was born in Scranton, born and raised in Scranton. Left this area at 9. Reason for that was my parents were very tired of the cold weather, and I kind of figured I'd have to go with them because I couldn't get a job at 9 years old. So we moved down to Miami Beach. So I kind of grew up there. And then by 1986, I decided, well, I'm coming back to my roots, coming back to Scranton, Pennsylvania. And what a difference.
It's always good to come home again, isn't it?
It is, it is. It was very rewarding for me to come back. I had some very, very good memories. And the only difference was actually there were more empty lots than I remember.
Oh, yes, but they're gradually being filled again.
Absolutely, things
Yes.
have really turned around, and I'm very grateful to be able to see that firsthand.
That's great. Well, tell me about, how did you first become interested in photography? What drew you to the medium of photography?
Well, that's pretty interesting. I was in high school, and I would watch these guys walking around with cameras, and they would get all the girls. And I thought, well, geez, that's pretty good. So let me try that. So I got a good look at one of the cameras, and there were numbers all over it. And I'm very bad at math. It makes me really nervous. And I thought, well, geez, maybe I'll just get the camera, but I won't actually take pictures because it involves the numbers.
Right.
And I ended up with the camera. Numbers actually made sense. Didn't get any girls, but I got into photography that way. And I must have had some sort of a natural eye for it because I didn't want to know about the fast and hard rules of composition because I thought that would kind of mess me up.
Yes.
I think I naturally just actually knew what it was. Now that I know the rules, well, geez, I had that all along.
You have a wonderful eye. I'm very familiar with your work, Ken.
Thank you.
And you have an innate sense of the drama. You know just where to put your camera. What camera did you begin with?
I started with a Yashica TL Electro in 1973, and it was one of the first electronic film cameras that was out there. And of course, I graduated since to Nikon equipment.
Yes, you made the transition
I did.
from film to digital. So did you do a darkroom work?
Oh, I always loved darkroom work,
Yes.
specifically black and white, because you're really getting into it. You're putting your hands in there,
Yes.
and time just stands still when you're darkroom.
Yes,
You go in there to do these things, and before you know it, 8, 9, 10 hours have passed.
And the chemicals involved, the magic process, it's
Right.
almost like alchemy.
It is. It really is. To actually see that image come up in the developing tray, it's just
Yes,
like magic.
it is like magic.
Mhm.
How did you feel about the transition from the black and white or the color development
Mhm.
process, the chemicals, to darkroom procedure, to the digital age?
Well, I was kind of a holdout for a long time with the digital stuff. And because I don't think it was quite there, and I waited and waited until it really became workable. Because I remember the park, the Steve Town where I worked, bought us a digital camera, it was old Kodak Mavica. And, you know, we're talking about the early 90s.
Very early.
And you take a picture with this thing, and you're clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking, and about 8 or 9 seconds later, the image would come up.
Yes.
And it was like 3 or 4 pixels. It really
Yes.
was terrible. So I really wasn't excited about it until these complex DSLRs have come out. And
Yes.
really, the good thing about it is it's instant gratification. Because with film, you just didn't know until a week later or after you've been in the darkroom whether that photograph came out the way you wanted it to come out. So with digital, you know right there exactly what you're getting. Now, that's good, but it's also very bad because so many people now have really good digital cameras, which are actually computers that take pictures.
Yes.
And just let everybody get a good picture. So people think, oh, just push a button, and there it is.
Yes.
There's a little more to it than that, but it's a great learning since I've taught photography, and instead of taking your photographs and writing everything down, and then a week later coming back and comparing what f-stop and shutter speed you had, and then see where you went wrong and didn't go wrong. With digital, you know right away, you can fix it right away, and it's a good learning process for people that really are afraid of it, but shouldn't be afraid of it.
Yes. And also now with the iPhones, cameras are really ubiquitous. Everybody can take snap, 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 snap. But there is a real art to taking a really fine quality, Smithsonian magazine quality professional
there is.
photograph.
Yes, like I say, it's pretty easy for people to get a good photograph.
Which is wonderful.
Wonderful, but there's a difference between a snapshot and a photograph.
Yes, and what is that?
And the difference is people don't want to look at a snapshot. People want to look at a photograph where everything works together.
Exactly.
And that's where composition comes in, and that's where having a photographic eye comes in. And I think it's really hereditary, because my son, who's now 15, and I never really taught him anything about photography, and he's got a cell phone camera. He's got a wonderful eye. I'm very proud of him.
Yes.
It's amazing that he just knows. And he doesn't know about the rules of composition, but again, he's got that eye,
Yes.
and everything works out perfectly. And I don't want to mess with that, because I don't want to ruin him.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That natural instinct that he has.
Exactly.
And a lot of the iPhones are quite, the quality of the lenses and things have improved considerably.
Absolutely. You know, to be honest with you, I don't take very many pictures with the DSLR anymore. I use a camera phone. Now, people said, well, you know, you get a lot of editing programs and all that stuff. And that's great too. It really is. Because at one point, though, what does it become a photo illustration? It doesn't make it any less good. But somebody has to get out first and get that image
And
first.
that is the thing.
That is the thing.
And what, the process, now I know from your train photographs, I'm so impressed with the photographs that you do in the train yards. And do you do any processing with that?
Very minimal, very minimal. What I will do is I'll use a very simple program that's no longer even available, which was Google's Picasso.
Ah, yes, I remember.
I did all my cropping usually in the camera. You know, fine-tune a little bit with this post-processing thing, but perhaps a little change on exposure, a little color saturation, a little sharpness, but I don't go too crazy with the photo programming too much. I try to do, you know, a straight shot if I possibly can.
Yes, and your colors are magnificent.
Yeah, thank you.
They're very wonderfully rich and saturated. Now, so you go to, say you go to a site and you're going to be photographing trains. What is it, intuition? What draws you to a specific scene?
Well, the fact is, you know, I've always liked trains. I've always liked transportation, and it's a natural for me to do that. What I try to do is something unique that you don't always see. The standard 3/4 word shot of a locomotive is nice, but what I try to do is I try to show the train and locomotive in its natural element,
Yes.
to give it some sort of context.
Ken, when you go to the train yards and you're completely in your comfortable world of trains, and what do you look for when you're going to shoot your definitive photograph? What happens in that process, in those moments, what do you look for when you're shooting the train?
Well, I look for something that's I haven't done before, number one. And number two, something that's kind of unusual. We get a lot of people, you know, at Steamtown taking pictures of the same trains that I would be taking pictures of, and I've seen a lot of these photographs. So I'm always looking for something a little bit different. How it fits into that rail yard, not that it's just one particular thing.
Yes.
Of course, we have to document things. I've been documenting things for 30 years there.
Absolutely.
But also, I want to be a little bit more creative for our website and for our unit grids, which are actually our little folders that we give out to people, and for our Facebook page. So I want something different that the normal person would actually see. And
Something that strikes you.
Exactly.
Striking.
And I'm at an advantage because when these folks come, they spend a couple hours there, but I'm spending there the whole day there, different lighting conditions, different weather. So I can have access to getting things a little bit different. So I'm a little bit more, ahead of the game as far as that goes.
I see. So that's what you're looking for, something
Something a
that is
little
bit
different.
different. I notice sometimes you focus on just parts of the train.
Yes.
The gears of the train.
Exactly.
Which is something that the average person doesn't even see.
Exactly.
And I also must tell you, I find your photographs, all of your photographs, have such impact and atmosphere. They're very artistic. You have a very good artistic eye in your photography. Now let's talk about Scranton and the importance of the railroads to that particular metropolis.
Okay,
of Scranton.
absolutely. We'll start with Steamtown, actually. People want to know why it was in Scranton. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the fact that railroads played a very important part, of course, of this nation's development. And Scranton, Northeastern Pennsylvania, was pretty much fueling the Industrial Revolution in this country in many ways. So it's natural to have a place like Steamtown with railroads, the story of American railroading here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. It really started not with railroads, but with iron making in the 1840s with the iron furnace. And what they did was they found that that actually started the industrial area in Scranton. And the iron furnaces were not very successful because of the quality of the local iron ore that they needed to use the furnaces with. And what they eventually ended up doing was getting the iron ore from the upper peninsula of Michigan, bringing it across the lake, then across overland Pennsylvania and bring it here. So that wasn't really working out for them financially. What really made it successful was the fact that it was anthracite coal that fueled that furnace. And that gave rise to the anthracite mines. Now you're mining all of this coal, how are you going to get it to the markets? That's where the railroads came in. So the railroads and the iron making, all of this came together in northeastern Pennsylvania. To make it a major railroad center, there were at one time 5 Class 1 railroads that serviced the city of Scranton. And of course spread out through the entire country.
So it was a hub.
It was a hub, yes.
Of distribution.
Absolutely.
And then also we had the passengers trains.
We had the passenger service, and this is certainly before the interstate highway system, and everybody, of course, had a car. And the way you traveled was, of course, by rail. And New York being the metropolis that it was, and still is today, what better way to go than on the Lackawanna Railroad from Scranton directly to Hoboken, New Jersey, and then across the river to Manhattan.
Exactly. And there has been much back and forth traveling through all the eras up until recently.
Well, yes. I mean, you look at some of the advertisements that the Lackawanna had specifically targeted towards the people that lived in New York, and they heralded the wonder of the Pocono Mountains.
Yes.
Get out of the city where it's nice and cool in the Poconos during hot summer in the city. So there was passenger traffic in both directions for the vacationers and for the commuters and for the regular tourists.
Wonderful. What is your favorite train? What is your favorite train?
Well, I'll tell you, everybody likes the Phoebe Snow.
Ah,
Now, what is the Phoebe Snow? I don't know if people would understand what that was, but Phoebe Snow actually was a fictional character that was put out by the Lackawanna Railroad's advertising department around 1900. And all the railroads in the country, just about every one of them burned bituminous coal, which is soft coal. Very, very dirty. Now, you never wore your good clothes when you traveled on a train with the steam locomotive because you'd be full of soot and cinders and everything.
And what time period?
We're talking 1900.
1900.
Yeah. Well, even before that, but the Lackawanna burned anthracite, which was a lot cleaner, burns hotter, burns longer, burns more efficiently. There's no soot and cinders. And they figured, well, why are we burning anthracite? Because they own their own anthracite mines. So not only do they sell the coal to market, they use it in their own locomotives. Consequently, it was a very clean way of traveling. Then we had Phoebe Snow, this fictional character that could dress in white ride the trains upon the road of anthracite and stay nice and clean. As a matter of fact, Mark Twain, who was very famous for his white suits, had a summer home in upstate New York along the Lackawanna Railroad. He would write about how clean the Lackawanna Railroad was. It would soil his suit.
Oh,
So Phoebe Snow was the advertising person, was actually molded after the Gibson girls around the turn of the century. And she could ride on these trains and be very, very clean. Well, that was great up until World War I, where the U.S. government said, well, the railroads, you can't use anthracite anymore. We need this for the war effort. Because our ships, our warships are fired by coal. If we put anthracite, you're not going to see smoke over the horizons of the U-boats.
Perfect, yes.
Won't be able to get you. So the Lackawanna Railroad was stuck burning basically mixtures of anthracite, bituminous, just about everything in the region. They became as dirty as everybody else. So Phoebe Snow kind of like went off into the distance. You didn't see her anymore. Until right after the Second World War, the diesels came out. In 1949, Lackawanna Railroad bought a set of diesels and air-conditioned passenger cars. And they renamed their named passenger train, which was called the Lackawanna Limited. They named it the Phoebe Snow. So Phoebe Snow went from a fictional character to an actual train. And you wouldn't get dirty, pulled by a diesel and an air-conditioned passenger.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Because you were a native of Scranton, because we're talking about Metropolis, what is your feeling? What is the best feature about Scranton, Pennsylvania? What do you feel is the quintessential essence to describe? I mean, New York City, everybody has their vision of what New York is. How would you describe Scranton? What is the essence of Scranton?
In a way, when Scranton lost the coal industry, it kind of became paralyzed, kind of stuck in time. And it is a throwback to the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. And while the rest of the world kind of moved on, Scranton didn't. And the new industry is tourism, historic tourism. So people have rediscovered Scranton, and rediscovered the fact that here is a city that was at one time a major industrial hub, pretty much looks the same as it did before, and we can actually travel back in time, and in a way it's kind of a little bit of a miniature New York City in some ways.
I always felt that.
Yeah.
When I lived in Luzerne County, went to Wilkes College, Wilkes-Barre, I always felt like I was going to New York City when I came to Scranton.
Yes. It was the big city at one time.
It certainly was.
Yeah.
And the opera house, all the vaudeville.
But this was if you can play in Scranton, you can play
You
anywhere.
can make it anywhere.
That's right.
That's the truth.
And they all came to Scranton. All of the vaudevillians.
They did.
They were here, and it's a shame that unfortunately all of that is gone now, because if there was ever going to be a museum of vaudeville, this is the place where they've been. Those theaters, unfortunately, they're all gone.
Do any of the buildings still remain?
Well, the Ritz does.
The
still.
Ritz.
Yeah.
And I understand there's a lot of renovation going on at the Ritz.
There is a lot of renovation in Scranton, which I think is great, because there is now a sensitivity to the historic aspect of it. You know, because when people think, we live in a disposable society. If it's old, it can't be good. We have to get rid of it. Case in point, the Lackawanna Station, built in 1907.
Yes.
You know, that building was built and designed to last hundreds of years. In the early 1980s, it was supposed to be torn down, and you won't see a building like that again.
Never.
Fortunately, it was saved. So there are places still in Scranton that have that old world feeling that still exist.
Yes.
And now there's more sensitivity to the fact that this is our heritage, this is our history. We're standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us. And those are those shoulders, those buildings, that architecture that you just don't see anymore is still in existence in Scranton.
That's so true. And the Architectural Heritage Society is very active in preserving
Yes.
what they can,
What
what
they
they
can.
are able to present.
Right.
Well, Ken, let's talk about your neon signs, which I think are the major focal point. When you come in that door and you see these neon signs, it's just so spectacular. Now tell us about how you got the idea, how it originated, this whole history of them.
Well, I started taking these photographs of these neon signs in the late 70s, and they always fascinated me. Just like they fascinated people when they first actually were invented.
Yes.
By a man named George Claude in Paris. He demonstrated the first neon sign in 1910 at the
In
Paris
Paris?
Auto Show, yes.
In Paris?
Yes.
Oh, how
And he
interesting.
started the Claude Neon company, and they saw immediately the opportunity for advertising. And people in those days were so enamored by these type of signs. They actually used to refer to them as liquid fire.
Liquid fire.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And it really took off in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and even in the 50s. Certainly in this country, as far as Americana goes. And I recognized that throwback when I was able to take these photographs, knowing that these neon signs are not going to be around forever because of technology replacing them. So I wanted to capture as many as I could throughout the country in all those years.
And you succeeded. Tell us a little bit about how the original neon signs were created and made.
Well, they started with a tube, glass tube, bent with heat to the shape that you'd like. Electrodes on either side vacuumed all the oxygen out, pumped in neon, which is an inert gas. When those electrodes would turn on, that gas would glow. Neon would glow in an orange color. And they started experimenting with different types of gases, inert gases like krypton and argon and xenon, which would give you even more colors. And then put a phosphorescent coating on the inside of the tube to get you even more colors. And I'll tell you, people in the 1930s, they couldn't wait to advertise your business with a neon sign because you've arrived, you've got a neon sign in front of your building.
And it was so distinctive.
It was distinctive and certainly a work of art.
Definitely a work of art. And really, strikingly, very simply says, here we are, this is what we do. And they're very exciting. Now tell me how you went across country and you took photos of all of these various, the tuxedo and the shoe repair and all the different.
Well, I would go out specifically on a night, wherever I was in the country, to specifically shoot neon signs. And it was interesting because these are the days before digital photography.
That's right.
And you were very limited as far as your shutter speeds.
Yes.
You had a very slow shutter speed. You had to bring a tripod out. And in some cases, it got a little hairy as far as people wanting to know what the heck you were doing.
Yes.
And I remember I had one in Fort Lauderdale. It's called the Propeller Club Bar. I think there was a shot of it here. And I was across the street photographing this, and some guy comes out, and he started giving me a hard time, thinking I was hired by his wife to watch him with his camera to prove his infidelity. And all I was doing was taking a photograph of the sign. Of course, he didn't believe me, but it did have its hazards on occasion.
Yes.
But I was very glad to be able to capture these. The fact that I knew it was a dying art form, and again, why was it a dying art form? It was because they were very, very fragile.
Yes.
At one time, there were over 4,000 small shops in this country that produced neon signs, specifically for that industry, the advertising industry. Of course, all gone now. The fact that I knew that was going to eventually, once these signs would break, and they would break because of windstorms. You're talking about blown glass outside.
Yes, exactly.
They very rarely fix them. And it's so depressing when I go out and I see what could have been a beautiful neon sign that's in disrepair and is not working anymore. Of Of course, they've been replaced now with, you know, LEDs and fluorescent lights behind plastic.
Yes.
And it's just not there anymore. Now, Ian's making a comeback as far as the art world.
The art world is
Yes.
just quite taken by it.
Yes.
There are many artists that are specializing in creating video. And there's the intricacy of it fascinates me.
It does, and the way they, like for instance, you take a look at the shoe repair place, it's all advertising the exact same service. But look how different they are.
They are all different.
They're different. So it's the
All
artist's,
distinctive.
imagination to be able to, and vision, to be able to come up with this.
And the way you have them displayed, tell me how you discovered the way of visually presenting yours.
Well, you know, I've been taking these with slide film for the longest time. And I end up with thousands of slides, each with a neon sign. What do you do with that? I had a light table, and I would put them in, it would backlit, they looked really great, but it's a light table, there's not much you can do with it.
Yes.
A few years ago, I discovered a gentleman up in Massachusetts, ran a company called Photoglow. And what he could do is you could take your slides, if you put them in a digital format, and actually print them on a medium that actually shows through with LEDs. So I made collages of each one of these signs and sent that digital image off to him. And as you can see, it really works because it looks like they're actually lit up and all the hours light showing through
It
them.
is so striking. It really is spectacular. Well, Katie, I want to thank you so much for participating in our show, Metropolis. You've added a very special quality to the show.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure.
And I want to ask you, will you take me out on the rails? And we can go out and you can show me the yards and the trains.
Absolutely.
And we'll make it a date and we'll include that in the documentary too.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Kenny. Thank you so
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. You know, a lot of people wonder why Steamtown National Historic Site is located here in Scranton. Well, it's a big story, and it starts out actually right after the Second World War, where the railroads were very anxious to get rid of steam locomotives when diesels came out. Now, they couldn't do it very well during the war because diesel locomotives were rationed just like everything else. But as soon as that war was over, the age of steam was on its way out. So they started buying steam locomotives, diesels rather, as a matter of fact, and steam engines became superfluous. They couldn't wait to scrap them. Now, fortunately, there was a gentleman, F. Nelson Blount, who owned the Blount Seafood Company up in New England. He was a very, very wealthy man, had a tremendous interest in steam locomotives. And he was able to get a lot of steam engines from these railroads that steam engines weren't wanted anymore. So basically, it's scrap value. So he collected all of these steam locomotives that nobody wanted. A lot of people, you know, collect model railroads and things like that. They put them in the basement, they put them in their spare bedroom. Well, he was able to collect the big size steam engines, the 1/1 scale, 12 inches to the foot. And he had a dream of making a steam town, as a matter of fact. An area that he was able to put together with all of these steam locomotives and actually preserve them, which is very, very important because we are a disposable society, and once these things are gone, they're gone forever. You never see them again. So he started up in New England in several places, eventually ended up in North Walpole, New Hampshire. Shortly outgrew that area in the early 60s, moved across the Connecticut River into a place called Riverside, which was outside of Bellows Falls, Vermont. And it became a big tourist attraction. Unfortunately, it was located in a very, very remote area, and in 1968, he was killed in a plane crash. So his dream almost died with him. Fortunately, the Steamtown Foundation was developed to carry on his dream. Now again, the disadvantage being in rural Vermont was a problem. So in the early 1980s, they decided they wanted to move. The logical area for them to end up was Scranton, Pennsylvania. Why is that? but one time Scranton was the major rail center. There were 5 Class 1 railroads that came through Scranton. The main railroad through Scranton was the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, commonly known as the Lackawanna Railroad. And they were absorbed into the Erie Lackawanna in 1960, and which became part of Conrail in 1976, which we are standing in the old Conrail PL&W Erie Lackawanna yards. Conrail pulled out of this area in 1979, and this entire steam area yard was pretty much stopped in time. So a better place to locate his collection was in this virtually intact steam area yard. So they moved down all of their equipment, including the engine behind me, the Reading 2124, in the early 1980s, mid-1980s, and developed Steamtown USA. After a very short time, though, they had financial troubles. The National Park Service realized that, boy, we haven't told the story of American steam railroading and how it affected the United States development, the industrial development in the United States. So the National Park Service got involved, and in October of 1986, Steamtown National Historic Site was created right here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to preserve and protect this valuable resource that contributed so much to the history of this country. The engine behind me is the Reading 2124, originally built early on as actually a smaller locomotive. It was rebuilt, believe it or not, by the Reading Company. It's not the Reading Railroad like you see in Monopoly. It's the Reading Company. They were primarily a coal mining company, and a coal mining hauling company, and they had their own engines and haul. They were the world's largest hauler of anthracite, which of course is hard coal. So they really got their fuel for free, so they really tried to rebuild their engines to make them even bigger. So this is rebuilt by the Reading Company and the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1947 is what you see here. Now it looks like it could run, it's in beautiful shape, but it can't. What happened here was we actually did what's known as a cosmetic restoration and stabilization, because keeping these things outside is not a good idea, and finding a space inside is almost impossible. So we have to keep this up as much as we can, and what you're looking at here is tens of thousands of dollars just to get it to look this way. If we wanted to get this thing to run, you're looking at least $2.5 million to get this restored to operating condition. So it's really not fiscally responsible to be able to do this, because once it's restored, you certainly can't keep them outside. That means they have to go into the roundhouse. But we also want to make it look good. And, you know, a lot of railroad museums, actually all of them, have their pieces sitting outside, and of course the weather gets to them. So it's always a fight against the weather. What you're doing by restoring it this way is buying it time until we can actually get to it, to take it completely apart at that tremendous cost and put it back together again to operating condition. A lot of manpower and a lot of money. This is one of the largest engines that we have in the collection right now. Okay, right next to the 2124, you can see the Reading 903. That's what's known as a cab unit, an early first generation diesel locomotive. Notice they're from the same company, Reading. So even Reading decided to go with diesels because a lot less maintenance on them. For a steam locomotive, you're looking at probably, well, maybe 4 months out of the entire year you can get a year's worth of use out of it. It's down most of the year. The diesel is like a car. If a part goes on this, it's an interchangeable part. It's like your car's part. They're all standardized. The steam engine parts have to be made for them. So you can see why the railroad really even wanted to cut costs with these first generation diesels. And diesels like this are as rare, if not more rare, than steam engines. A lot of people remember these, at least of a certain age. Very few people remember these. This steam engine has turned into history. The first generation diesels, more like nostalgia on their way to history. But again, this is what people really think of when they think of a diesel locomotive. Okay, I'm standing in front of a switch. A lot of people don't realize that trains don't have steering wheels on them. Trains have to go where the tracks lead them. Sometimes, a lot of times, as a matter of fact, the track will go off in a different direction than you want it to go off. Well, this is what the switch is for. Train goes on these rails and the tracks will diverge. Now, which way is it going to go? Well, it all depends on which way this switch is thrown. Because you would come over here and actually pull this lever up, called part of the switch machine, and what that does, it connects this to a rod where the switch points would switch over to the other side, directing the locomotive to a different track. Now, without this, you'd have a single track, and you would have to go wherever that track led you. But by having multiple switches in the yard here, you can get on any track that you want based on which way the switch is aligned. Okay, the magnificent structure behind me is the Lackawanna Railroad Station. And you can probably see the railroad spared no expense in building something like this. But as nice as this building is, it wasn't the first Lackawanna station here in Scranton. The first Lackawanna station, we're talking about the 1880s, 1870s, was on the other end, the opposite end of Lackawanna Avenue. And there were 5 Class 1 railroads, as I said before, that serviced the city of Scranton. Just about all of them had their own railroad station. The Erie Railroad Station is where Cooper's Restaurant is right now. The Central Railroad of New Jersey Station is across the river, across the Lackawanna River from where the original Lackawanna Railroad Station was. They shared facilities with the New York, Ontario, and Western Railroad. The Delaware and Hudson Railroad had a station on the other end of Lackawanna Avenue, which was across the street. So all of these different railroads had these different stations. And it wasn't convenient if you had to transfer from one railroad to another railroad. You'd have to go across town. So railroads got together around the turn of the century, turn of the last century, and decided they were going to build a union station, one station to serve the needs of all the different railroads. And in true railroad fashion, they argued about it for years. Who would control it, what it would look like, where exactly it would be located. So after all of this, the Lackawanna Railroad said to you guys, well, that's enough. We're going to build our own station on the other end of Lackawanna Avenue, this end. And again, sparing no expense. Now, this building cost the railroad $500,000 to build in 1907. You couldn't paint it for $500,000 today. The train station was in service from 1907 all the way up to the mid-60s. Can you imagine how many millions of people walk over this terrazzo floor going to their trains? Very well used building. Now, of course, passenger rail, especially the Scranton, really declined in the 1960s. And this became a little bit less of a busy place, especially after passenger service stopped completely in 1970. Of course, with the advent of Amtrak in 1971, Scranton had no longer any passenger service. So this pretty much lost its value, or lost its usefulness as a passenger station. But it was still the headquarters of Lackawanna Railroad. 1960, though, the Lackawanna merged with the Erie to become the Erie Lackawanna. Now, the Erie originally was a much larger railroad. It went from Jersey City all the way to Chicago, with a lot of duplicate lines with the Lackawanna. What happened was the Erie's headquarters was in Ohio. So this became downgraded as the headquarters of the Scranton division of the Erie Lackawanna. So you see it's losing its importance now, even as in a sense an office building. 1976, April 1st, the Erie Lackawanna became part of Conrail. Now, Conrail was a very large railroad, and of course had no passenger service. Didn't even want to bother with something like this. This became a liability. So after a few years, by 1979, this became basically vacant. And it's a shame because you see buildings like this that are designed to last hundreds and hundreds of years, and not even close to that, it became superfluous. What happened was, vandals got in here, they started ripping places and things apart. It was abandoned. There was a small taxi stand that had their office out in front of the building, and that was basically it. It was an empty building. So what's going to happen? Well, believe it or not, this building was very close to being torn down. As I said before, we have a disposable society. And once things like this are gone, they're gone forever. Everybody regrets after it's gone. Oh, we should never have done that. But in many cases, it's too late. Fortunately, a group of investors got together in the early 1980s and purchased it and attracted a major hotel chain to actually run this for them. And you can see after a change of a few ownerships, it is now restored to its former glory and then adapted and reused as a hotel with certainly a railroad theme. This building is such a pride of the Lackawanna Railroad. Again, I said there's no expense in putting this thing together. You can see by Tiffany style stained glass barrel vaulted ceiling here that originally went all the way across. Unfortunately, when the building was abandoned, vandals got in and threw office furniture through the ceiling. The offices were above all of this. And what you see here is what was saved from that incident. But again, look at the detail. You can see, again, the pride of the railroad. In each corner of one of these sections, you can see a D, an L, an ampersand, and a W. Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. Always a reminder as to whose railroad this was. Try to make you feel real small, make you feel really who's in charge of your safety, and that, of course, would have been the railroad. Now, the industrial history of Scranton started in the early 1940s with the structure you see behind me, which is the Scranton Iron Furnace. It's the remnants of 4 anthracite-fired blast furnaces that made iron rails for a big part of the railroad industry, specifically the Erie Railroad to start in the 1840s and 1850s here in Scranton. So this almost in a lot of ways ties into Steamtown as far as being, in a way, one of the birthplaces of American railroad right here.
The photography of Cyd Pearl is the stylistic growth and deepening through the passage of the lens from classical nature capture to the artistry of fine art impressionistic photographs and her own unique method of abstraction, creating images of the flora and fauna in our area. Presently, Pearl is turning her camera to the powerful realm of environmental photography, having conducted programs at the University of Scranton, amplifying the urgencies of today's environmental dilemmas by inspiring people to become a part of nature rather than a force that manipulates and destroys it. Another gifted artist featured in Metropolis is Alice Taylor-McGraw, who hails from Dunmore, Pennsylvania, and has previously exhibited at the Chamber Gallery in the group exhibit, The Promise of Spring. I have always found a profound sense of joy in nature. My mission is to share the joy with you, stated Alice. I picked up a camera about 2 years ago and haven't put it down since. Whether I'm taking shots in my backyard or an out-of-town location, I try to capture the splendor of nature, the intricacies of a dahlia, the pattern of a blue jay's wing at a particular moment in time. Photography is my passion, and I hope to make you smile. Alice Taylor-McGraw has received recognition in the past Chamber Gallery in the exhibit Trilogy, containing many more of her photographs, which is very well deserved. While Alice is a gifted nature photographer with a unique relationship to her animal subjects, she is now branching out with a growing interest in urban landscapes, developing the expert spontaneity of capturing the unique serendipity of life. As she moves through the world, Alice is discovering and creating intriguing compositions within artistic dimensions and is emerging as a true professional photographer, yet retaining the wonderful joy she first felt in her initial experience with photography 2 years ago. In the Chamber Gallery exhibit Metropolis, Alice takes her camera to rarely visited scenes in the outer surrounds along the railroad tracks of Scranton, including the Ringling Brothers train, the Scranton Lace Company with the beloved and iconic tower, and the old Gertrude Hawkes factory, which sadly has been dismantled. My mother was always a very avid photographer with her Brownie camera. She managed to capture all the wonderful moments of my birthdays in my life and all of the wonderful games that we played, as all of our parents did in the day. The thing that always impressed me about my mother's photographs was the composition. It was so beautifully composed and captured so much the joy and happiness of any occasion. I later had a very good friend whose father had a rangefinder camera, and I must have been about 14 years old at the time. And he let me use it. And I remember going to the 44th Cemetery, which was really like a beautiful, beautiful garden in London somewhere. And I was in it was wintertime actually, and I noticed there were bare branches in the back. It was right before you go to the Susquehanna River, and there were some brambles and trees, and up came these beautiful, beautiful daisies. And it must have been still winter time, but that in between time, before winter changes into spring. And I took the photograph, and I took it to in those days they had wonderful photo shops where if you were a young person, you could go in and you could ask questions, and they would give you wonderful answers and give all of their attention to you. And I had the film developed, and I had a print made, and he said, "You are a photographer." And I know I loved it. So I got the idea in my head that I really wanted to learn how to develop photographs, the real art of photography. At the age of, probably by that time I had turned 16, I had been taking photographs in Wilkes-Barre on the street. I was a street photographer at the age, a very young age. So I decided that I would teach myself the more complexities of photography, and I received a very lovely real camera from my mother for Christmas, and I decided I really want to learn this. So I investigated. I went to my friend, the gentleman in the photography store, and I said, what would I need to really set up a darkroom? And he gave me all the instructions on, you need an enlarger, you need the trays, you need the chemicals, you need the box to develop the film roll box to develop the film, you need a red light, you need a totally darkened room. And I thought, oh, I really want to do this. And so I spoke to my mother, and she said, well, is there something you could sell? You should put something forward of your own money towards this, and that would be wonderful. And I did own a very lovely old train set. And I went to my daddy and I said, Daddy, I know this train set means a lot to both of you, but I really want to put a darkroom together. He said, Ruthanne, that's a wonderful idea. He said, I know, I have a friend who collects them, and this would be a prize. He said, we'll get the money from that, and we'll get, you can have your darkroom. So I did. And I continued to have a great passion and love for it. And then as I got older, I went to Wilkes College, and I majored in English literature and theater. And I also took a very wonderful course with a very famous photographer who happened to be named Mark Cohen, who grew up in Wilkes-Barre, and his work is in the Museum of Modern Art. And he wanted to give back to the community, so he decided to have a photography class at Wilkes College. And all the art department people were in the course, and I was in the course, and it was wonderful. And we had assignments, and we'd go out on the street again, and I was quite proficient at walking the streets taking photographs, and I fell in love with it. And then in the theater at Wilkes, I was taking portraits for our plays that we would be doing. And we were doing Little Foxes at the time by Lillian Hellman. And I took all the Victorian portraits of all of the main characters, my friends. And we were on old-fashioned Victorian porches, and it was great fun. And then I had them developed, and they were mounted in the foyer. So when you came in, it was rather like Broadway. But from that point on, photography has always been a part of my life. And I love, as my mother had pointed out to me through her photographs, it's the composition of the photograph. Can you capture that feeling and that heart in the photograph? And to me, I always use the expression, it's always where you put your eyes. Wherever you put your eyes, there's a photograph. As my life progressed and deepened, I found a theater to be
very, very satisfying to me, because I always felt the theater should reflect and hold up a mirror to life. And there were a great many lessons to be learned by going to the theater, by seeing The Crucible by Arthur Miller, or any of the great plays always have wonderful messages. But my passion and love of photography really outshone everything. And I became a professional photographer. I'm 68 years old now, and I'm very proud of it. And I think there was a turning in my life when I was about 40, and I really put all of my energies. I've been being a part of the gallery scene in Scranton and showing my work in Kingston and various places in Wilkes-Barre. And I got to see how much that means to artists. I think it's very important that artists have the opportunity and the encouragement to exhibit their work, that it's not just a hobby. Yes, it is certainly for themselves, it's their gift, but a gift must always be shared. And through a circuitous route, I became the director of the Chamber Gallery, and I love giving opportunities to very, very talented people in our area. And there are so many of them. And I've had 6 years of really fine exhibitions. They're an experience and a joy. And Sandra Anderson always plays her beautiful music. We always have a lovely array of food, and it becomes a party and a celebration. And it's so wonderful for the artists to greet their guests and to be lauded, actually, for their work. And it's a wonderful feeling for all of us, and it's a joy. And I must say, with the pandemic, we are faced, I call it the time of the pandemic, and we are faced with something that has never quite been experienced in our modern times. There was, of course, the flu effect, the influenza flu, of course, but it is impacting our lives. Our lives have broadened. We have access to more information. We know what is going on in the world, and we have a much more active, I think, society where engagement with others is so important. And that's the irony of the reception that was due to be opened only a few days before the cancellation due to the lockdown with the pandemic. And it changed everything. So I feel that we must approach art and our lives in a different way. And I always think of an obstacle as not necessarily a blockage, but a way to pause and think about things in a different way. It can shift you in a direction that you never would have thought of, in a creative direction you never would have thought of if it hadn't been for that particular situation. Certainly this is very, very dark and very serious, what we're facing now. But so was World War II. And I really have a great admiration and affinity for our parents who went through that time. But also, I, through my study of history, know that some of the greatest works of art, the most revolutionary periods in art and in literature and in the theater and in society occurred during those difficult times. And I think we're called to change. There is no going back to the old and what they call the normal.
There's nothing normal anymore. But and there isn't even a new normal. There is something new that is being presented to ourselves, that we must face. And I think artists are really trying to deal with this. One of the reasons for this documentary is because of a wonderful group of women called Women to Women Thrive. And we have been gathering together and working on various enterprises and things to help the community now for probably 5 years or more. And they came to me and they said, Ruthanne, we were going to have the Art Thrive, which the Chamber Gallery always participated in. It was a wonderful festival organized by the women, giving many different craftspeople and artists an opportunity to sell their wares, but most importantly, to educate and to show what it is they do and how they do it. And I think it was always a wonderful thing. They had gotten 2 grants, one from Pennsylvania State and also one from the wonderful Lackawanna Arts Council. Thank you, Maureen McGuigan. You're a great asset to our county. And we got the grants, but we could not have the festival. So we decided to use our new technology of our time, YouTube, and the wonderful videography that we can do with our cameras and our cell phones, and demonstrate. Each artist demonstrates their particular talent and how they do it. And they asked me, what would you like to do? And I said, Metropolis is such a wonderful, wonderful exhibit. It deals with cities and the challenges that cities and the denizens of these cities face. It was very ironic that we chose, the artist chose to choose this particular subject, which is so crucial to where we are right now. And the artists include Warren Cox, Cyd Pearl, Kathy Fallon, Ruthanne Jones, Ganz, and a wonderful group of people who have decided that they love the city, whether it be New York City or Scranton, and in my case, of course, Carbondale. And so we're putting this video together to show all of the wonders that we have that we can never forget, and to be memorialized in our lives and used as inspiration. And that is why we are producing this documentary. And also, the artists have contributed so much to this exhibit. We would love to have a reception in the future. We hope to, when the all clear is given. But in the meantime, it gives us a sense of purpose, a sense that we can work together on this project and put forth our ideas and carry forward in a very productive and creative and exciting way. And that is the reason for this documentary, to provide hope and inspiration. I'd like to talk a little bit about my own personal journey as an artist, a fine art photographer. Because of the present time, through, again, our wonderful technologies, we all have access to our cell phones. We want to record everything we see, and it's so fast and so quick, and boom, 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 we have our pictures, which is wonderful, and it's exciting, and I love it. But as a fine art photographer, I see the world in a different way. I see it through art. I see it through a different kaleidoscope of lens. And I have recently, maybe for the past 3 years, have gone in a different direction. I feel it's important that a photographer has their signature. An artist, it comes right through them. It's right through the hand, the heart, the hand, right onto the canvas. For a photographer, it comes through the heart, but it also comes through the eyes. I have been experimenting with my dark. I was very, very reluctant to come to the digital camera. I loved working in the darkroom. But, and one thing I really want to say, everybody, there's no question, working in the darkroom is a magical, alchemical experience. And I think one of my great heroes was Ansel Adams. And everybody thinks that he just climbed up those mountains with those studio cameras at the time, and took these photographs, and boom, there they were. Ansel Adams would spend hours in the darkroom on one photograph, printing up to 50 different versions before he got to the final one. Now, when you produce a photograph using an enlarger, you're seeing everything in reverse. Black is white and white is black. And you also have shadows and light. And you do a dance with your hands to hold back the light, to deepen the image, and to open, to bring out a lighter part of it, to bring more detail in. So it's a constant dance that you are doing with your hands. It's fascinating, but it's also extremely difficult. And I honestly think Ansel Adams would love Photoshop. And I know Photoshop has become kind of a pejorative, but it is one of the most creative inventions of our time for a photographer. So I've taken, I've always loved to do everything the wrong way. Not to follow the rules. Yes, in my life, I follow rules in my life, but to take risks and chances with how I would create a photograph. And I've gotten into abstraction, and I find it to be very fascinating and very compelling. So some of the images that will be included in this documentary will be other images that the artists have taken that is their passion and love, along with the photographs of Metropolis. And I'm going to include some of my abstractions. And I utilize the tools of Photoshop in ways you're not supposed to use them in traditional photography, and I find the effects to be incredible. And one photograph of mine in the abstraction mode could take up to a month to do. And I'm so thrilled with it. And I go into a state of deep meditation. It's a deep form of no time. It's a deep form of inner reflection and also a releasing of different parts of the brain, different parts of seeing the world. And it's a very fascinating process that I do. And I feel it's my own. I know Kathy Fallon said, a friend of hers had said to her in one of the interviews, do something that only you can do. And by golly, Kathy Fallon does. And I think I do too. And I think it would be very difficult for someone to replicate a Kathy Fallon photograph. And I think it would be very difficult for anyone to replicate one of mine, because they're coming from a different place in the mind and the heart, and a different view of life. And I hope people will have a new understanding of abstraction. There's a lot of scientific exploration into consciousness. Then, remember, enunciation. Consciousness that is being developed, and how we are is all linked together in a form of the cosmos. We are part of the cosmos. And I think some of my abstractions, I kind of touch into that etheric aspect of the world. And I just wanted to explain a little bit more about those abstractions for you. Thank you. I, of course, have chosen my topic for the exhibition Metropolis to be Carbondale, the city of Carbondale, the pioneer city. There are many different reasons why this town is called the pioneer city, and I think it's very well chosen. The Industrial Revolution in our country began in Carbondale with the discovery by the Wirtz brothers of anthracite coal. And that is clean burning coal, and it is the best coal you could find. And it was the D&H Railroad that was utilized to transport the anthracite coal. So therefore, it was a very empowering force for the economy of Carbondale, and brought many, many different people into the town. Many people from other countries, many immigrants came in to work in the mines. On my mother's side, they were miners. I think that it's important to keep in mind that Carbondale has gone through a great many changes over the years. In the heyday, the glory days, as I like to call them, of Carbondale, architecture was very important. The architecture and the beautiful churches that the people built themselves, literally. They would give their wedding bands, anything they had for the making of this church, to fund the church. They were people who came together and, despite their differences, worked together. And I feel that's very admirable. Through time, there has been a shift in the industry and in the environment. And I think that Carbondale has been faced with very, very hard challenges. Almost two-thirds of West Side burned down. And they're very resourceful people. And they had to find a way to rebuild. Where was the money coming from? They mined more anthracite coal. They sold the coal. They got the money together, and they were able to rebuild and to keep their town going. When I first came to Carbondale, I was enchanted. It reminded me of Bedford Falls in It's a Wonderful Life. And at that time, my parents had passed away, and I was looking for a place that I could call my home, that I could go. If my car wasn't working, I could walk to town, and I had easy access to all of the wonderful cultural activities in the town. And I had the opportunity to photograph Carbondale. That was my beginning of how I discovered Carbondale. And I fell in love with the architecture and the people. And the Carbondale is actually a time capsule of architecture and landscape. We're 10 minutes away from the beauty of the forests, of the farmlands. We're located in this beautiful upper valley. We're surrounded by mountains. We're in a golden bowl. And it's a very wonderful community. And I wanted to capture that through my photographs. And I have, again, just been so taken with the beauty of this town. And I also want to mention many people who have come to the Chamber Gallery and receptions are overwhelmed by the loveliness of this town. They want to move here. Is that house for sale? Is that shop for sale? I want to be here. There is a magical draw, a lodestone that draws people to Carbondale. The people who have grown up here may not understand that, but I've come from the outside. Many of my friends have come to Carbondale to settle. And I think that speaks so highly of the people of Carbondale. And they are resilient, they are embracing. If you have something to give to the town, they'll say, sure, come on, do it, we'd love it. And that was my experience in Carbondale and many other people's experiences here. And I wanted to reflect that in that quality of timelessness in my photographs. As you see, I love the photograph of St. Rose's Church. That could have been, that was a worked photograph. I like to work in the form of a lithograph. And that looks like it's right out of the 1940s. And I admire so the incredible architecture of St. Rose and all of the churches. I've done Mount Carmel. It's an incredibly beautiful church. I've done many photographs of Mount Carmel that aren't in this particular show, but I believe one is in the rectory. One of my works is in the rectory of Mount Carmel Church. This is Park Place behind me. I had the great opportunity of helping out Paul and Chris over at Rosal Floral and Antiques for a while there. And it was one of the happiest times of my life. And we had Donna Zaremba's jewelry store. We had Rosal. We had Nellie's Bakery. It was a wonderful time. And that street captures the feeling, to me, the essence of Carbondale. And I just want to say how much I love Carbondale. And my work grew and deepened during my time here. I plan to spend the rest of my life here, photographing and living joyfully in the Pioneer City. And Carbondale will always continue. And I want to express my deepest appreciation from my heart to the artists that have participated in this very unique, wonderful, wonderful exhibition called Metropolis. I'd like to thank Alice Taylor-McGraw and her beautiful documentation of buildings that are no longer with us in Scranton. I'd like to thank Kathy Fallon for her beautiful, beautiful fine art photography of New York City and also her hometown of Scranton. I'd like to also thank Kenny Ganz and his American Neon and his preservation of the neon signs. That's what you think of when you think of the big city, the neon signs. And I'd like to thank him very much for his insights into the history of the neon signs, and he's terrific. I'd also like to thank Cyd Pearl and her environmental photographs. Cyd is a remarkable photographer in that she is very dedicated to the beauty of nature and also wants to protect that beauty of nature through her environmental photography, focusing on the things that need to be changed. And I think she's done a very brilliant job of capturing some of the issues that are of importance in our time.
Of course, Warren Cox is a member of the Architectural Heritage Society. He has been painting since the age of 50. He's come to it later in life, but he is a great lover of architecture. His family has lived in Scranton for generations, and he is very knowledgeable of the history and very dedicated to the preservation of the architecture. And I'd also like to thank Ruthanne Jones for the opportunity. I don't often show my work, but this is my tribute to Carbondale that I love with all my heart. And also, making a documentary is a very involved process. There are many different parts that go into the making of it. And I would like to thank my friend and artist, Melissa Anawai, who has done all of the on-site locations that we have had in the documentary. And I want to thank her for her wonderful support. She's a brilliant artist in her own right. Her work is very unique and very much her own signature. And she has had a solo show here that was absolutely beautiful. And she's a dear friend of mine. And I would want to be in the foxhole any day with Melissa Anawai. She is someone you can really count on. And I want to thank also my dear friend, Brian Roth Masters. He is a joy in my life. He is a wonderful videographer. He's very inventive. I wish he would write a book. He's lived in California where he grew up. He worked in the Metropolitan Opera. He has studied acting in the American Theater and Academy, and he is a loving, kind, wonderful gentleman, and I'm very proud to know him. And he has a beautiful little dog, Maggie, that is very prominent in a lot of his photography. He has been so kind and wonderful in helping to edit this beautiful documentary and has been so supportive to me. And I want to thank the Greater Carbondale Chamber of Commerce and the board and executive director, John Gore, and Michelle Bannon, and Lori Thomas, and Cindy Klink, and all the wonderful support they have provided to the Chamber Gallery. We would not exist if it hadn't been for their wonderful support. And all of the artists are very thankful to the Greater Chamber Commerce in Carbondale. Thank you from our hearts. Kenny Ganz and Warren Cox are two artists whose works appear in this documentary, and they have also been very, very prominent in the making of this particular documentary called Metropolis. Kenny Ganz just today took us over to the rail yards over at Steamtown, over to the Radisson Hotel, and he's so knowledgeable. He's worked for 32 years over at Steamtown and knows such wonderful, interesting stories and facts, and he loves trains, and he's a brilliant photographer. And his works have appeared in Scientific America, in National Geographic. We are very lucky to have Kenny in this show as an artist and as also a very important scholar of the railroad industry. And his pieces are the American Neon. And they're very fascinating because he took the photographs, they are lit from behind, and they actually look like they are neon. And they're wonderful. Also a participant in the exhibit and brilliant artist Warren Cox, has also been a very much an important part of the making of this documentary. A couple of weeks ago, we spent a lovely time in Scranton and visited Nayoth Park, the Everhart Museum, the Cultural Center, the Albright Library. And he is a very wonderful friend and a very knowledgeable gentleman, and his expertise and Penny's expertise really add greatly. And I want to thank them both for participating in the documentary. Thank you.